Hello. Thank you very much for coming. This is one of the most momentous days in the history of the Department of Computer Science. I very much appreciate your coming to share it with us. I'm Bruce Porter. I'm the chair of the Department of Computer Science. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping rules to tell you about. This lecture will be taped and then broadcast later on the Longhorn Network. So if you don't want to be on TV, you should leave now. Please turn off your cell phones completely. There'll be a question-answer session with Bill Gates after his lecture. If you have a question, please come to the microphone. It's over here in this aisle to my right, to your left. If you're over here on the left side of the stage, then you can get to the microphone by walking down the center aisle that has a wide aisle to walk through. You'll get a chance to ask one short question. No follow-up questions and no discussion, please, because we have to allow time for others to ask questions too. Please don't disrupt the event. And with that, I want to kick things off by asking President Bill Powers to come to the podium. Thank you very much for coming.
Well, to everyone here today, welcome, mainly to our students, and a special welcome. I'm Bill Powers, and I'm the president of the University of Texas at Austin. And what a special, special day this is for the life of our university. And we have three very special people with us today to help us celebrate it. Dr. Calvin Lin is a computer science professor and director of the Turing Scholars Program. And Dr. Lauren Ansel Myers is a professor of integrative biology, as well as the director of the Division of Statistics and Scientific Computation. They're from the College of Natural Sciences, and both are doing very exciting work that they will tell us about in a few minutes. But now it is my true pleasure to introduce our very special guest to the UT campus. He's an American icon, a pioneer in computer science who helped bring the power of computing to millions of people around the world. His products are deeply embedded in how we perform our jobs and how we live our lives. Take away Microsoft and this university, along with other universities, businesses, and organizations of virtually every kind, would screech to a halt. But as all pervasive as his influence has been on modern life, I believe that history will show that Bill Gates' technological influence will be listed second to his work in philanthropy. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has granted more than $25 billion to eradicate disease, alleviate poverty, and enhance education since its founding in 1994. In 2005, along with Melinda and Bono, Bill Gates was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. He's a smart man. Yes, he is a very successful man. But history will remember him first and foremost as a good man. A good man who, along with his wife, a native Texan, I might add, has done profound good in this world. I am so glad he has made time to talk with all of you, and especially with our students today. Please welcome Bill Gates.
Thank you. Well, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. I was very excited to come down and see the new building and be part of the dedication. And I have to say I'm very impressed. The environment that the students here are going to study computer science in will be very a nice one and very fruitful, I'm sure. It's quite different than the environment that I learned computer science in. When I was fascinated by computers, they were very big, very expensive, very hard to get to. And in fact, my local university, the University of Washington, only had a few dozen, and they were locked up because they were so precious. And so I had to find ways to sneak in at night, get tied into some project, convince people I could help improve these computers, just to get a little bit of computer time. And it was the insight of my friend Paul Allen that the chips would change things, and then my view that software would be the key ingredient that got he and I to drop out and start Microsoft. We decided that instead of focusing on the hardware side, we'd focus on the software side and build a company, build products around the idea that computing wasn't going to be just a few big machines. It was going to be a tool that we took for granted. In fact, when we had our slogan, "A computer on every desk and every home," that was considered wild and radical. Today, of course, you can go even further and talk about every pocket and every device and every wall. And so the pervasiveness of computing is something that is really phenomenal. And it's just a tool for our creativity, our desire to communicate, our desire to try things out. And it really is quite powerful what's going on. If I had a choice to be a student at the time I was, when the idea of personal computing and the internet were being created, or today, I'm not sure which I'd choose, because they are both very important time periods. Certainly in terms of the impact on the world, it's the era that we're in right now, building on all that previous work, that is going to be the most exciting. So there's a couple of ways we can look at this change and say, okay, why is this period different than in the past? Why are you enabled to think up new approaches that would not have been possible before? And one is to look at these, let's call them quantitative measures of how cheap things are. I mean, after all, I just use an example. If storing an hour of a lecture costs over $10,000 per hour for the disk storage space, the idea that all the teachers will be recorded and people can look over what they do and give feedback and students can look at any lecture, that becomes very silly, because where's all that money going to come from? Now, when it costs 2 cents to store a lecture, it doesn't take much either in terms of charitable giving or a little bit of ad display before having that video is really a trivial thing to do. And so, you're in an era where thinking about millions of hours of video being easily available to anyone connected to the internet, that's just common sense. In terms of storage, it's this exponential curve, and of course that's key, is that the legend there is not a linear legend, it's logarithmic, and so you're seeing mind-blowing, specifically exponential improvements here that make storage not a limiting factor for almost any dream that you come up with, whether it's taking genomes and comparing them, looking at all sorts of varieties of plants or human disease and seeking out the patterns there. The ability's there. It's really the algorithm, your imagination, that limits it. So, that's one quantitative thing. Another quantitative thing is the processor itself. And as I said, this is the key breakthrough that really turned computing from a tool of governments and large organizations into a tool of the individual, and brought it down into almost any form factor one can imagine. The speed was going up at the same time the cost of the transistor was going down. Now this particular one, the clock speed, is actually a tough one. It is hitting some limitations, and we see that sometimes. The cost per transistor, we've got about a decade where the exponential decline. It's pretty clear how we'll achieve that, and there probably will be innovations to extend that out further. Here with the processor speed, we're actually hitting some limits. Now, all that means is that as you think about software, you have to figure out how to use parallelism. That is, instead of a single processor doing a big task, you have to break that down into many different processors to get the equivalent. And that again, is an area where we need a lot of breakthroughs. A lot of things that we do don't naturally lend themselves to that type of thing. Some physical models, like modeling the weather, modeling nuclear reactions, you can break it into dimensional space. It's very straightforward, but for a lot of things, it's not. And so we need big improvements there. So I think the quantitative story is valuable, but in some ways it's very dry and doesn't give you the full impact of what's possible now. It's much more this qualitative story that it really becomes different. Just like, computing became so different, because I was young, the idea of software being a key element of that was something that, I could see that people have been around those expensive computers, they didn't see that. Now, there are some qualitative things that are part of this era that will be foundational in the applications that are built. The idea of high quality vision that the computer can see and recognize very well. It's very, very straightforward. The idea of recognizing handwriting, recognizing speech, the idea that displays are going to be cheap enough to essentially either you'll cover all the flat surfaces or perhaps you'll project through some type of advanced goggle devices onto your eyes in such a way that the world itself there'll be infinite resolution. In fact, even combining things that you see in the real world with annotations, enhanced reality type things, that'll be standard practice. The hardware devices that do that, which have been very expensive, sort of military-only heads-up displays, will get down to consumer price points of a few $100s or less. Also, the idea of taking what's going on in the world and seeing it digitally, not just buying patterns, but how people move around, what they're interested in doing, the amount of data that will be available to learn and work on behalf of customers or governments or whatever goal you're trying to achieve will be very phenomenal. And so you see so many new startups, new breakthroughs, academic work, in all of these different areas. As we can model the world inside the computer, things like designing products, trying out new drugs, it's an application area of great importance. It will become far more efficient than actually trying things out in the real world, discovering new materials, discovering new catalysts. We're right on the verge of where the in silico models will become a primary tool for finding where the next advance should be. And so in some ways, mathematics was the handmaiden of all the sciences in the 1900s. Now, it's more mathematics combined with computer science, or the handmaiden of how genetics will advance, or how material science or biology will advance. And so the impact of both horizontal and vertical work done in computer science is way greater than ever before. Of course, this school is a leader in some of the work on robotics, and that, it goes way beyond what we did in terms of mechanizing agriculture and manufacturing. It's, in a sense, the mechanization of almost anything. And so this intersection of how you take those qualitative improvements that require imagination to think about how they can be used, and those quantitative changes, and see, what can we do out of that, that's where the big breakthroughs come through. And one aspect of this that is particularly interesting to me is how do we take those advances, not just for those who are most wealthy, people in the United States who are doing well, but take those advances for the entire globe. And so taking domains like health and agriculture and sanitation, financial services, and actually making them affordable, usable for everyone. And so we're really lifting up the living conditions of those who are often invisible to us, but in some ways should be our highest priority. How do we help them? And that's not always immediate. You've got to get people who understand these horizontal breakthroughs, understand the challenges being faced, and in order to pull that together. I mentioned drug discovery in silico modeling. UT Austin is a big leader in this. It's something that's pretty fantastic. In fact, I was talking with Professor Bazaj today about, okay, how good is your resolution? How well is your software able to model what drugs or antibodies might be able to interfere with this, which is the HIV virus. And that's a very important problem because the challenge of the HIV epidemic has not been solved. We have drugs that can keep people alive, but we can't afford those drugs for everybody. Complying with those drug regimes is very, very difficult for people who are in poorer countries. And so the real solution here is to block, prevent somebody from getting the disease, either through prophylactic drugs or through a vaccine. And so understanding the shape of this little spike and how it enters into the cell, the sooner we can do this, the sooner we can lift up millions of lives. So it's, it seems like a very abstruse thing, and yet it touches our condition in a very deep way. And it was exciting to hear the great work going on here. Staying on health is an application area. One of the things we'd like to understand is how diseases spread. And there's a lot of diseases that are epidemic and could spread very quickly. And we saw not too long ago the SARS epidemic, which spread out of China into Canada and looked like it could be a serious problem. Well, very quickly, seeing which interventions can stop those spreads, or how we can take diseases that are still prevalent on a constant basis, like malaria, and how we could stop that disease, it's very important. But since it's very expensive to do in the real world, to try would tools do an eradication, the best is to have a computer model. And so this dream of having an epidemiological model for any of these diseases has been around for over 100 years. In fact, you can go back to British military man Ross, who discovered that malaria was transmitted by mosquitoes, and he did an early, pretty simplistic mathematical model about the exponential spread. But he couldn't capture the richness of the disease. Even the sort of classic model here where people move between states that can work stochastically is a nice mathematical model. It doesn't capture the richness of the disease. So this, which is what we've had up until very recently, is not good enough to answer the key question we want, which is, could we go in with drugs and killing mosquitoes and bed nets and actually take whole countries where lots of children die of malaria, almost 1 million worldwide, would that work or not? And so as part of my foundation work, we've gone into software people and asked them to come in and do a far richer model using a technique here called Monte Carlo simulation, which allows you to capture a lot of the very rich dynamics, allows you to capture the how much do people move around, what are the variety of mosquitoes, things that a simple set of differential equations or even a classic stochastic model really can't capture the deep nonlinearities that exist. And when you want to get an eradication, that's pretty important. So in a sense, this is a software problem. It's another one where there's great work here at the university that you're going to hear some about in terms of looking at flu and some other diseases. So, a real potential to contribute. In terms of how education takes place, that's one of the more hot topics right now is, will education really for the first time in hundreds of years be changed by technology? Of course, you use things like Microsoft Word to create your papers. You can look facts up on Wikipedia, but the actual delivery of instruction and the personalization of that instruction, really the promise is all in front of us. When somebody's taking a remedial math class, why should they have to listen to the things that they already know? Why shouldn't it be just the things that they're having a tough time on? Certainly one-on-one instruction is the ideal, and perhaps a combination of smart software together with educators can create something more along that model. And so you have lots of innovators. In fact, tomorrow I'll be in Austin at the South by Southwest conference talking about the entrepreneurs who are coming into this educational software market and trying to make a contribution. Khan Academy, which is a group that our foundation has backed, Saul Khan and a bunch of people he's pulled together, is an example of a free site that's pretty phenomenal, both with the short lectures to explain things and with the problem sets. And now over 3 million students a month are coming up and taking advantage of that resource. And there's a lot of experimentation, thinking of, okay, should the classroom be more about problem solving and people watch the lectures outside the classroom? That's the flipped model. Or how do we take this and help all kinds of students? The students who are ahead, the students behind. How do we make math education far better? And the way we learn math really didn't change in the past, but my bet is that if you take 10 years or certainly within 20 years, it will be far, far better. And improving something like education really can pay big dividends for society. It's sort of the way that society invests in its human capital. And so it's wonderful to think how we can unlock more people's potential, make subjects that have been sort of uninteresting and boring a little more interesting by bringing interactivity, the best lectures, and a real sense of who's understanding the subject. And so when we think about computer science as a handmaiden, not just of the sciences, we can think about all the big advances we'd like to see in the world. For example, take energy. We need low-cost energy. For somebody in a poor country, the cost of lighting at night, the cost of getting their inputs in for their farming, energy costs really limit what they're able to do. And so we need to bring that down. That's really been a big hallmark of the progress of civilization is energy availability. Now we know that we have to do that with the constraint of coming up with energy sources that either don't generate CO2 or that CO2 is sequestered as part of that energy generation system. And so again, simulation, understanding materials, it's going to be a lot of things with a very rich computer science-enabled digital background that'll let us move forward. And so, I hope all of you will dream very big dreams, not just about computer science, but about how you might be part of a team will take and advance these very interesting problems. And so that's basically why I envy you being in computer science today. Thank you. Well, now we're going to use this opportunity for you to hear a couple of great things going on at the university. And then after the two professors have shown their great work, there'll be a chance for a Q&A. So let me ask Professor Calvin Lin to the stage. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I want to start by telling a little story. Turns out many years ago, I used to work at Microsoft during the summers. And one day I was eating hamburgers at this little restaurant called Kid Valley. And there was this scruffy man wearing a red plaid shirt sitting a couple of tables over. And my roommate goes, "Wow, for a second I thought that was Bill Gates over there. But it's just a homeless guy." And I said, "Dan, that is Bill Gates." But what I really want to talk about today is a problem. I want to talk about a problem that's a little bit more important than Bill's wardrobe. As you might know, there's a huge gap between the supply of computer science graduates in the United States and the demand for the available jobs. And so this yellow area here represents a huge opportunity cost, and a way to look at it, it's a huge drag on our economy. Okay? And this graph here talks about college students, but really the problem starts in high school. And the issue here is that we typically have two types of courses. At one extreme, we have courses that are computer science that talk about tech apps. And the problem is that these types of courses are hardly computer science, and they're definitely not inspiring. At the other extreme, we have courses that are programming courses. And sometimes these are very good courses. The problem is that they're narrowly focused, and at times they're somewhat intimidating to students who are new to the area. And so they're very self-selective, and they tend to primarily attract white males and Asian males. And in fact, it's this lack of diversity that's a real problem. Okay, so let me just look at the demographics. This table here is really sad. This says that in 2011, only 11% of the CS majors who graduated from colleges in the United States were female. So first of all, just the fact that we are ignoring almost half of our talent pool is a huge waste. But secondly, I think we all believe that if we had more women in computer science, those women in computer science would feel more welcome and certainly be more happy. And of course, the guys would be happier too. In terms of ethnicity, what we see here are the number of whites. The number of whites in computer science are actually pretty high, 66%. And the only issue here is that as we progress in time, the white population of the country is obviously falling. If we look at Asians, Asians are actually overrepresented, and their population is growing a bit. But the real problem here is when we look at the underrepresented minorities, for example, Hispanics are severely underrepresented, and they are a very fast-growing segment of our population, and blacks are even more severely underrepresented. Here in the state of Texas, the problem is even worse. In just a few short years, blacks and Hispanics will be a majority and whites will be a minority. Okay, so if we continue to ignore those segments of the population, our economy is going to be in trouble. So we believe that there's an alternative. Led by the National Science Foundation, there's a new type of course called CS Principles. And the idea here is to take a broader view of what computer science is. Try to teach students what the power of computing is, what the impact can be, and why it's just such an exciting field. In particular, what we are doing here at UT is we have a collaboration between the Department of Computer Science and the College of Education, which is called Project Engage. And in a nutshell, what this course is, this is our course webpage, is a CS Principles course, which I just described. It uses blended instruction, and it uses problem-based learning. So let me spend just a minute to talk about these other two topics, and you can get a sense for why this course is potentially useful. Okay, in blended instruction, the course is taught by a local high school teacher, and they are supported by curriculum and materials that are provided by UT, as well as guidance and expertise that we provide. The key point here is that this is a way to scale the course to a much broader set of schools than might otherwise be able to teach them. The structure is particularly important, we think, for many of the schools that are resource poor. And unfortunately, you find most of those in the rural areas and in the urban centers. Our course also offers dual credit, which may not seem like a big deal, but in fact, it's been shown that dual credit courses disproportionately benefit those who are most at risk, meaning those who are most at risk of not going to college. Okay, problem-based learning is a very old pedagogical approach to teaching, and the ideas here are to really motivate and engage students by getting them to work collaboratively and to think critically about problems that they might care about. So to just give you a very brief example of what this might look like, you might use as a motivating example the fact that Target knows if you're pregnant. They do this by looking at what you buy, and they've done all sorts of data mining to understand when you buy certain things, you must be pregnant, or someone in your household is pregnant. And using this problem as a motivation, we can hopefully better teach students and inspire students to learn things such as data mining and computer privacy. Now, I could go on and on about this course. I think it's a great course. I think it'll have a big impact. But I think the real point here is that we as a community need to really rethink the way we teach computer science at the high school level and maybe even earlier. And my hope is that you, as the hope for our future, will include amongst you some who will rise to the occasion and help us solve this problem. Thank you. And now I would like to invite Lauren Myers, who's going to talk about how we can use computers to solve some important issues in public health. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Every day, tens of thousands of children around the world die from infectious diseases like HIV, malaria, tuberculosis. My message to you today is that number crunching can save lives. The computer science skills that you're learning today at UT can help us in the fight against infectious diseases. I'm a computational epidemiologist. I use mathematical modeling, data analysis, and high-performance computing to address three basic questions. Where are diseases spreading today around the globe? Where will they be tomorrow? And how can we stop them, given our limited public health resources? Unlike other areas of science, our knowledge about disease control is hampered by an inability to conduct controlled experiments. We can never go out and actually test whether vaccinating one group will save more lives than vaccinating another group, because we would never intentionally infect anyone or withhold potentially life-saving interventions. Computers give us a way to circumvent this problem. As we just heard from Bill Gates, we use computers to simulate plausible scenarios and then test out interventions that we can't test in the real world. We also use parallel computing and efficient optimization algorithms to very rapidly search large numbers of possible policies, strategies to figure out which ones are going to save the most lives. And equally important, computer-enabled visualizations of outbreaks, whether they're real outbreaks or simulated outbreaks, allow us to effectively communicate to public health workers on the front line, to decision makers, so we really can bring the best science and the best data to bear on global health challenges. For example, this is a visualization of a pandemic spreading across the United States. We developed this interactive tool very rapidly during the early days of the 2009 H1N1 flu pandemic, when we were working with the federal government to help them figure out how best to use the strategic national stockpile of 80 million courses of antivirals to protect a population of 300 million people. We were able to provide effective decision support because we could very rapidly search through hundreds of millions of possible distribution schedules and evaluate them, and also because this visualization provided critical intuition as to how a pandemic might spread and what might be the impacts of large-scale use of antivirals. But even with the very best strategies in hand, we cannot effectively control outbreaks of flu or any other disease if we don't have access to reliable data. We need to know as soon as possible when and where new diseases are emerging, how contagious they are, how deadly they are. And for ongoing outbreaks, we need to maintain situational awareness so we know who is at risk, when and where to intervene, and what might unfold in the coming days, weeks, or months. That's why the Centers for Disease Control maintain a nationwide flu surveillance system that consists of thousands of doctors' offices and labs around the country, shown here on this map, that submit weekly flu reports. In 2009, the state of Texas asked us to evaluate Texas's flu surveillance system. The question was, are the numbers coming in through surveillance actually telling us about deaths and hospitalizations throughout the state? So we developed a new data-driven simulation-based method for optimizing surveillance systems. The actual Texas surveillance system consisted of about 200 doctors, providers spanning the state. We were able to design a much more efficient, simpler system consisting of just 35 well-placed providers that actually provides better information. The method that we developed can be applied to improve surveillance for almost any disease around the globe, and it can also be used to integrate traditional information sources like doctors with next-gen sources of information, like health information gleaned from internet search engines or Facebook or Twitter. Right now, we're using the same method in collaboration with the CDC to optimize national-scale lab-based surveillance for viruses. We've also gone on to work with the state of Texas to help them actually translate surveillance data into improvements in disease control with a suite of web-based tools, including a flu forecaster, and a decision support module to help with optimizing stockpiles for limited medical resources. Finally, I'd like to share an example of where a computational study is going to help us to save lives and money on the other side of the globe. In Zimbabwe, over 1.2 million people are HIV positive, and schistosomiasis infection, which is a waterborne parasite, is known to increase the risk of HIV infection in women. The question we asked is whether treatment for schistosomiasis can actually be a cost-effective control strategy for HIV, given its impacts on the transmission of HIV and the cost of treatment. Using a computational model that captures the very complex interactions between these two different diseases, we found that indeed, mass treatment of school-aged children for schistosomiasis should prevent 80,000 new HIV cases and should save about $63 million over the next 10 years. In an era of global change, newly emerging diseases, a growing threat of drug resistance, reliable information and rational decision-making go hand in hand with our desperate need for new, more effective drugs and vaccines. It is increasingly clear that careful, data-driven models, systematic optimization of control measures, and intuitive visualizations really can translate into life-saving improvements in public health. As more highly trained computer scientists like yourselves take up this charge, the world will benefit. Thank you. I now would like to invite Bill Gates and Bill Powers to return to the stage for questions and answers with our audience of students.
Great job.
Thank you. Great job. Well done. Well, thank you, Calvin, and thank you, Lauren, and Bill, thank you for your presentation. We do have some time for questions and answers, and I'd like to start and open it up with the first question, and then we'll take questions from the audience, again, going to the microphones. This is actually a question that was submitted by one of our students, Joshua Gutierrez. And Bill, it's, what do you think will be the greatest challenge for computer scientists in the years ahead?
Well, there's many problems. For example, coming up with parallel algorithms because of the nature of the way our computer resources are increasing. If I had to pick one, I'd say that verifying correctness is probably the most interesting thing, because these systems are getting large enough that it's not like the early days of programming where you just hand your program to somebody else, they look it over, they can kind of see if the logic works. You have so much data, so many boundary cases, so many systems interacting with each other that some sort of formal technique for proving correctness, that there's a lot of interesting work going on in that, but it's a tough problem. That'd be the one thing, if you could wave your wand and get one wish, it'd be formal specifications that you can actually prove correctness with, because you heard some of these amazing things we're relying on software to do for us, including running our financial markets, protecting the security of our electricity grid. And so correctness will be kind of the toughest problem of all.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. At the back, Mike.
Yes, good afternoon. Bill Gates, my name is Juan Takeda. I'm a fifth-year PhD student in computer science, and I just want to, first of all, thank you for helping us have this new building. I think in just the last couple of weeks, I've seen the productivity increase in orders of magnitude, so thank you very much. I had a question. There's this argument, we know that we need more computer scientists, but I don't think we only need just computer scientists. Computer scientists, we need to be combined with different fields in order to solve these global problems that we have. What do you suggest as telling all the room full of computer scientist students, what should we also think about? What other fields? What should we double major? Should we look into biology or social sciences? What should we combine our abilities in computer science with?
Yeah, I think that the ideal is that if you're a hardcore computer scientist, you pick at least one other area that both will help inform you in terms of, what broad tools would be valuable, and that you'll be able to work with people in that field and help them solve problems. So I'm not sure it's absolutely critical which one you pick. After all, we need a lot of you to also have an understanding of biology, very interesting field. We need a lot of you to have some understanding of material science and the key problems that come up in building new energy systems. We need some of you to think about education, and this idea of how do you data mine various educational experiences to come up with ways that students of all type will be engaged and able to learn in a much lower cost fashion. I think it's fantastic once you pick your area, to go see it hands-on. If you care about disease, getting to Africa and seeing how malaria really shapes communities in a very tough way, and that if we don't get rid of it, they'll always be held to very tough conditions. If you want to help with education, going to inner city schools and where the dropout rates are often over 50%, and trying to think, okay, that's the environment that this work has to help out in, I think that would be very valuable. So, I almost think, it's probably too rigid, but almost everybody should have a minor in some way that computer science is going to be used, in addition to understanding the basics about algorithms and programming and databases.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next gentleman.
Hi, my name is Gilbert Bernstein, and I have a question for you about your philanthropy. About 100 years ago, the big philanthropists were all railroad tycoons and oil men, and they focused a lot of their money on physical infrastructure. And I'm curious, a lot of the stuff that you seem to be focusing your philanthropy on is more information technology, health, and what place do you think today there is for philanthropy that's more situated in physical and structures our society?
Yeah, the philanthropists of 100 years ago did set a very powerful example, and they did a lot of amazing things. In fact, on a global basis, philanthropy in the United States is the envy of other countries, because it's able to try out things, innovative and diverse things, although with a very high failure rate, with enough of a success rate to really come up with big breakthroughs. And so, Rockefeller funded Rockefeller University, which worked on a lot of disease work. He funded hookworm elimination in the South, which was pretty enlightened. He funded schools, particularly for blacks in the South, because the government was completely underfunding that. He funded a lot of cultural things. He funded University of Chicago. He funded Beijing University, IDA. So he was very diverse. He made his money in oil, but between himself and his son, and actually an advisor they had who happened to be named Gates, they did a very good job. Carnegie's an interesting one. He, of course, made his money in steel. He worked in the railroad industry, then owned the biggest steel company in the world. And he's most famous for going around to different communities and building libraries. The basic idea being that if a kid had the energy to want to go and read and learn things, it was sort of tragic if the inability just to be able to buy books, which were dramatically more expensive back then, if that's what held the kid back. One of our first foundation projects was actually putting personal computers with internet connections in to over 50,000 different libraries around the United States. And now we go around the world and do that in different countries. So it's very analogous, although it's more digital than what Carnegie did. And so it's amazing to see that universities, both in urban environments and rural environments, libraries are emerging as sort of still a very vibrant institution where people can have access that they wouldn't be able to get elsewhere. So I don't think in terms of infrastructure, I think that's more governments doing it, our private models. When we fund things like charter schools, we're often funding new buildings. Here with the computer science building, it's about as infrastructural as you can get. But if you look at the bulk of our money, and I'd say this is true of philanthropy broadly, it would be more things like inventing a new medicine, a vaccine for malaria, or funding studies about which teachers are really good, what are they doing so well, how do we spread those best practices to others, and how is that technologically enhanced. So there'll be a bit of a balance there, but philanthropy is very small. If you take capitalism, private business, it's by far the biggest. Then you take government, it's pretty good sized. It's only about a third the size of the private business. And then there's another factor of 10 down between government and philanthropy. So philanthropy has to pick things that are new and different that the other two models somehow wouldn't be able to get at.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Melissa Melton with InfoWars. What do you say to critics who claim your global vaccination program is nothing more than a eugenics program?
A huge,
Eugenics. Over 48,000 children in India have been paralyzed due to polio vaccines linked to your foundation.
no. I mean, nothing has saved more lives than vaccination. The key figure that we think about in terms of what we're prioritizing is the tragic death of young people. But if you go back to about the time I was born, more than 20 million kids under 5 were dying every year. Smallpox, measles, a variety of things. By 1990, even though the number of children in the world, because the population growth had gone up, that number had come down from over 20 million to about 12 million. And because of the work that the foundation has been at the center of, we now got that down from 12 million to less than 7 million. And the goal is to get it down to well under 3 million, by which time the disparity between what happens with poor children and what happens with rich children will have largely been eliminated. So, vaccines are about saving lives, improving lives. There's no better tool that mankind's ever invented for absolutely those things. And polio, the whole idea is to reduce and to zero the number of kids who are being paralyzed. And it's during between now and 2018, if things go well, we expect that'll become the second disease ever eradicated. Smallpox back in the 1970s, by 1979, that was certified as the very first and so far the only disease that has been eradicated. So we're pretty close on polio, but what it's about is every year having less and less kids who either die or are paralyzed. Last year it was 232.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Jaime, and I'm a freshman in computer science, and I wanted to ask you, when you're around our age, what was your goal in computer science? What did you want to do with it? Because I know a lot of us here are very passionate about what computer science is and what it represents to us, but I was curious as to what you initially thought you would do with computer science and how it's changed over time.
Well, computer science in the 1970s, when I was involved, had some of the same ambitious goals that still exist today. In fact, you could say we were pretty naive because we thought, hey, we're on the verge of doing speech recognition. We're on the verge of, and by some metrics we were. It's amazing as we've gotten into these things how good humans are. In fact, it's almost a decade ago that if you took computers in a completely noise-free and a completely random generation environment, that is, there's no context, no background noise at all, computers can actually do, and have for some time done, very good recognition. The things that humans are so mind-blowingly good at are both the noise elimination and then even more importantly, understanding context. So even things that in an information theoretic point of view on their own are actually incredibly ambiguous, you're able to resolve because you know who's speaking and other things, the topic they're talking about, basically what's likely to be the case. And that is still this incredible holy grail that, as you move up to deep understanding, you can say that we've made fairly modest progress. But I was actually a little worried when I went off to do Microsoft, which was a very important dream to me, the idea of a tool that I wanted to use to create documents, to navigate information, to communicate. I thought, okay, this is kind of the prosaic stuff that we can understand the path forward on. I thought artificial intelligence, boy, I'll be gone for about 10 years doing this Microsoft thing. Maybe the big breakthroughs will be made while I'm gone. Well, in fact, only not that much progress was made. And so it's fascinating now, this so-called deep learning, which is a advance in machine learning, actually is accelerating things like speech recognition. And the question of, is that a new technique that models to some degree, what we think, although we don't fully understand it, what the brain does. These few decades could be the breakthrough, or we could find that in terms of fully matching human learning, that again, we're naive and it'll take more time. So it was the tool to help people, which that was the Microsoft work, and then the whole AI dream were the two big things that I was obsessed with. Hey, how can we move forward on those?
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we could go on forever on this, but we're going to try and limit it to the time. So why don't we take two more quick questions then?
Hi, I'm William, third-year student here. One thing that I'm interested in that was noted beforehand was the big deficit between CS students and people trying to get into the industry in the field and the amount of jobs that are available. What do you think? Do you think there's going to be a large bubble in growth with people very interested in enjoying this massive availability of ways to get into it, or is there going to be a huge bubble and it might burst some point in the future?
Well, I believe that the current levels of enrollment are, the fact that it's going up is very sound, and that there will be jobs for anyone who has a high quality degree like a UT Austin degree. It's true that if you let it expand by, say, another factor of 3 or even maybe a factor of 2, you could get in dangerous territory. And in fact, we went through a cycle where in the late 90s, computer science got up to large levels. In fact, as a whole, I think we're just now getting back up to those peak levels. And then in 2005, things dropped way more than they should have. Actually, it dropped by almost a factor of 3 and got things into a period of shortage. And now we're working our way back up. In fact, what's happened to deal with this shortage problem is that companies in the field have been forced largely to go to Asia and have their R&D jobs be in Asia. And by Asia, I mean primarily India and China. And so as those countries have improved their computer science graduates, where you have some really top schools like Tsinghua or IIT, a lot of the demand has gone over there. I know, speaking for somebody like Microsoft, we'd prefer to have the jobs here because the other skill sets, the marketing, the testing, the program management, are way more available here. And building that team that includes the engineering domestically is the most straightforward thing. But there's been this imbalance, and you do the work wherever the engineering talent is. So hopefully that will be less necessary to either go overseas or to have people come in. But I think we're at very reasonable levels now. But the way markets work, they sometimes will go too far. I doubt that'll take place. I think the limit will be how we get kids interested. So I'd give you a pretty positive outlook in terms of your opportunity set.
Thank you.
Thank you. One more quick question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Parth. I'm a third-year CS major, and my question was about education and just given the systemic issues that we have in our country that are preventing or making our education system bad. One of them is that our teachers are extremely underpaid, and it's hard to get our best people to become teachers. What do you think, or what do you see as a solution that our society can take for getting our best people to take teaching jobs?
Well, we don't actually understand who is the best going into education. There's a surprising, there's not some perfect correlation between your SAT score and how good of a teacher you are. And so I don't think the answer is to necessarily brute force the system into some elitist mode where it's pushing up the entry criteria based on classic academic credentials. I think to the degree we want to improve the teacher workforce, the key is to actually have people in the teaching environment evaluated, get feedback, and to have a deep understanding of what it is that the fantastic teachers are doing. Our foundation funded 30,000 hours of videotaping of great teachers, and then had people look and say, okay, what was going on in that classroom in terms of how the topic was being explained, what the interactivity was? Why was it so different than in the average or below average type classroom? So it's amazing how little's been invested. If you come up with an effective R&D percentage for various fields of human activity, computer science, drugs, they have a pretty healthy percentage. But education, which in some ways is the most central activity of all, has very low R&D taking place, either funded by the government or philanthropy or however it might be done. We don't do enough there. And so, yes, I think it is very important that we give teachers more feedback. We are the country that spends the highest percentage of our GDP on education, and yet we don't rank in the top 20 as a country. So it's not clear, having spent way more money than the systems that just are dramatically better than us, Singapore, China, Finland, Korea, being the top 5 ranked in the world, it's not clear that money alone is the thing. We've doubled the amount of money we put into K through 12 education over the last 15 years, and test scores, math, literacy have stayed basically the same. They've gone slightly down. So the main competitive problem is that everybody else who spends way less, they've improved their scores very dramatically. So it's a very important question. Resources are part of the equation, but the teacher personnel system, the use of technology, I think there's some other major factors that go in there as well. And it's why our foundation spends about $800 million a year trying to help come up with some of these answers and make it a much, much better system.
Thank you.
Well, what a treat and wonderful experience for our students. Let's thank Will Gates. Thank you. Now, as one very short final segment, we can't let you get away without properly thanking you and giving you a somewhat unusual, but I hope appreciated gift. We think that you probably have lots of plaques and mementos in your office and on your bookshelves, so we're going to give you something a little bit different. We have a program here at UT called the Freshman Research Initiative. It creates new scientists like no program before it, and at a scale that's never been attempted. It's the largest program of its kind in the country that has freshmen at the university actually involved in authentic research projects in labs with faculty. So I have a very short video. If you'll join me at the podium, we'll watch it, and then we'll hear from another friend of yours. I think we need sound.
Yeah, let's start it. Yeah, go ahead and play it again.
I get to do things that I didn't imagine I would be doing 3 years ago. I thought I was gonna do what a normal college student does, go to classes, maybe get involved in research eventually. I started researching ways to grow switchgrass, which is a grass that is getting used as a source of biomass to produce biofuels. And now I'm researching about antibiotics. The Freshman Research Initiative accelerated the process of becoming a scientist. I go back home and I tell my parents, and sometimes they just cry. Like, they go like, you do such great things, and it's unthinkable. My name is Christy Bertalis, and I research antibiotics.
In 2005, we started with 15 students in each of 3 research groups, and the next year had 250 students in 7 different research groups. And now we're at over 700 students with over 25 different research groups.
Maybe the most important thing they get out of the FRI is they get to be scientists right away. And in the process, they're going to discover something that's unique, something nobody else on the planet has ever known about the universe before. That's why we do science.
Science is not this thing that you just, come in on a given morning and do some work and get the Nobel Prize. It is this thing where mostly there is failure upon failure upon failure. And students need to learn that experience of failing without it costing them their grade, without it costing them anything other than the realization that this is real science.
They get to do things that nobody else has done. And that's what really helps them decide, is this something that I love? Is this something that I want to do? Or is this something I can respect for the rest of my life? Freshmen don't know what they can't do.
This is, in fact, a very revolutionary program, and I mean that in every sense of the word, because we have streams in autonomous vehicles, robot cars, we have streams in gaming, we have streams in genomic engineering. It is incredible, all the things we do.
I'd always been interested in physics and astronomy in particular, and so when I heard about exploring the universe with white dwarf stars, and that's what grabbed me, I guess.
When I first got to college, I think like almost every other bio major, I'm gonna be pre-med, that's what I wanna do, wanna be a doctor. And once I got into a lab and was doing work, I realized how much I actually had a passion for the research part of science.
It's awesome to be 18 and just a freshman at the university and involved in such a cool project as this, where I get to mess with robots and teach them how to do things.
I went to do a medical mission trip, and that kind of struck my heart, and I really wanted to do something related to infectious diseases.
If you'd asked me my senior year of high school that in 2 years I'd be doing top-of-the-line, cutting-edge research in astrophysics, I would have called you a liar.
I've been at UT anyway for 30 years. And you might ask, does it get stale? And the answer is no. And the reason it doesn't get stale is because of the kids.
I really believe that all education is self-education, and so all I really want are students that are excited enough to go and learn for themselves. And I can guide them and direct them, and I can, save them some time. But mostly, I'm looking for them to come in and be excited. And if they do that, the rest is easy.
The amount of different work that's done at UT is tremendous. So if I wanted to do literally anything, I could do it. That's what thrilled me the most. The fact that there's so many things being done at the same place, and that they're just there. If you ask, you can do it.
When you get cynical and you look at the newspaper and you think, oh, there's no hope for our country or our planet, and then you look at these kids and it's different. And the FRI program gives these students a chance to succeed at a level that affects not only the University of Texas and the state of Texas, but affects our country and the world. We're cultivating genius, and that's essential for our survival on this planet.
Well, Bill, this program, as the video showed, has research streams that these freshmen get involved in. They do this work in fully functional labs. It's cutting-edge research. And so our gift to you, to thank you for all you've done for us, is we are giving you a research stream. We're creating a new research stream called Do-It-Yourself Disease Diagnostics. So the gift to you and Melinda are 30 undergraduate students for 3 years. That'll be a total of 90 undergraduate freshman students who will be trained through this program to develop self-test diagnostics. They'll gain a basic understanding in diagnostics. They'll collaborate with computer scientists, and they'll create social networks to see the impact that they have on diagnostics. And this gift is made possible to us and then to you by your good friends, Bob and Kathy O'Rear, and the College of Natural Sciences. So Bob, will you please join me on the stage to give this gift? And as he's coming up, let me just introduce him very briefly. He's one of our own, a UT mathematics alumnus, now retired. He joined Microsoft Corporation in 1977 as their 7th employee. to become their chief mathematician and project manager. Bob, thanks to you and Kathy for all of your support. And if you'd like to just say a few words.
Well, Bill, we've known each other a little over 35 years. And I think we have firsthand experience on what can happen when energetic minds go in the same direction. And the direction of this freshman research initiative is aligned with many of the goals that you and Melinda have espoused over the years, and have full confidence it will be fruitful in the end. Now, we couldn't package up 90 students in a little package and give to you today, but we do have a symbolic token of T-shirt. And we would like you to wear this with full Texas pride. You're now part of the Texas family, and please continue.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you. Great. Cool.
Well, as we said earlier, the work these students do will be in your honor and dedicated to you, and that is our gift to you for all you have given the world and given to us. Thank you so much for your vision of improving the world, both in computer science and health and in so many other ways. We hope you'll always feel like a Longhorn and a Central Texan and a Texan at heart, and you are welcome in our family at any time. Ladies and gentlemen, please again. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. It's fun. Good idea. Yeah.
All right, well done.
Thank you all.